So we have all of these announcements from Star Wars Celebration. We have the films with Sean Levy's new film. We have a Darth Maul crime show and an anime show. We got a new Clone Wars strategy game. We have a reskin of a kind of mediocre ride, right? So I guess the question that we should be asking after every Star Wars Celebration, after we finish celebrating, of course, is where should the franchise go from here? And you know, I think there's two paths that they can take, and because they can really take many paths, including just doing more of the same. But I think there are two paths that they could take that would result in some really interesting work. The first path, and they're already kind of somewhat doing this, or they have done this in the past to varying degrees, is they should really lean in and focus on completely different, both kinds of stories, as well as focusing on stories within different time periods. That's one path. So I kind of made it sound almost like those were two different things. Like focusing on new stuff, new kinds of stories, new time periods. You know, again, I joked about it, you know, in my the section about Sean Levy's film. Like, I'm tired of this. Just a few years after, like Mandalorian, a couple years after Return of the Jedi, Sean Levy's film, a couple of years after Rise, like, you know, something like Knights of the Old Republic. I believe when BioWare first started to like kind of coordinate with Lucasfilm, they were like, Lucasfilm was like, you have two choices. You can make something directly tying into the prequels, like an Attack of the Clones adjacent film, or you can do something completely removed, like thousands of years before any of the films. And they were like, we want to do the latter, right? Because it just gives you way more freedom and flexibility to do different kinds of things. Because you're not like, oh, well, this person's going to lead into... Like, of course, it's all still in the same continuity, so, like, you can't have Alderaan blow up 4,000 years before it blows up in you know, episode 4, right? But besides that, you really have wide berth to do whatever you want, and the sands of time will smooth out any edges by the time, you know, the timeline catches up to, like, the pre-established stuff, right? And I think that really worked in KOTOR to great effect. So I would really recommend them doing that. And it seems like the Ninth Jedi, because I don't know when that's supposed to take place in the Star Wars universe. I think it's ancient, like it's pre Phantom Menace or anything like that. So that could be really interesting. But then I have my hot take, which I never thought of until recently. I'm going to do another little quick plug for the podcast I do with my fiance Viviana, called Now That's What I Call Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And a season or two ago, we did Star Wars. So you can find the link to the show in the description below. And at the end of every season, we do a franchise retrospective, where we kind of talk about the franchise as a whole, you know, what works about the franchise, where we want to see it go, what would make it successful. And I arrived at an idea that I never thought of before, and I've never really heard other people suggest it in this way, or suggest it like with actual seriousness. I think the mistake Disney made, but I don't blame them for making this mistake, because it made sense. It makes sense, and I think it made sense at the time. It just hasn't really worked out for them. They made the mistake of deciding, okay, we're going to wipe the canon clean, except for the 6 films that George did, as well as the Clone Wars show, which he was intimately involved with. But everything else is wiped. So then what happens is you piss off people, because now their favorite story is in canon. Their favorite character is in canon. You know, luckily people like Thrawn have kind of made their way into the canon. But someone like Mara Jade, who for a lot of people was like a really interesting female character in the Star Wars universe, very different than someone like Princess Leia, she has yet to return in any capacity. But even that suggestion, that basically it becomes a piecemeal of like, oh, well, we'll reintroduce this character into the canon, this, that, right? And it just gets very messy. So I think the only thing they can do, I'm not saying this would result in the best stuff ever, but I'm saying it at least creates the possibility for really cool stuff. Whereas with their current scenario, they're really, you know, kind of boxed in. I think they should do a complete reboot. I think that they should, out of respect for George Lucas, but also as like just a base ground, because without this, what is Star Wars? Adapt the 6 films and go chronological. Start with episode 1, but improve the dialogue, improve the performances, make the saga feel more cohesive, rather than a trilogy and then a prequel trilogy that is meant to anachronistically explain stuff in the original trilogy. Use the same cast, so you can do parts 1 and 3, wait a decade, and then have the same actor be Obi-Wan in both. Not that really matters, that kind of consistency, but doing this using that framework, you're not starting from square one. But you're still doing something new. It's a reimagining of the stories, the same way we reimagine Batman, or we reimagine a text that gets adapted into different film versions, and they follow the same basic structure, but they have nuances and changes between them. I think that's the only way Star Wars can survive, because at this point, it's basically just smelling its own farts at this point. You know what I mean? It's just, so again, I'm not sure how you would even do this, and how would you do it for it to be good, but that feels like the only thing you can really do. To really shake things up. And by doing that, essentially as a parallel universe, a completely different continuity, you don't have to worry about pissing people off because you ruined this character. There are new versions of the characters to begin with. So that's where I feel like they should go. That's very radical. And things would have to get really bad for Star Wars, which seems like, how could it get any worse? Like, people's perception of the franchise is so poor. But it would have to get really bad for, I think, Disney, or, God forbid, they sold it to someone else, for someone to even consider doing what I just suggested. So, in that sense, then, I think they just really need to focus on different time periods and different kinds of stories, focusing on different nooks and crannies of the universe. Or, here's a novel idea. Still do stuff with familiar characters and settings and concepts, but just make it fucking good. Like, that's the biggest problem with most of this shit, is that it's just, the quality is just not good. It's not helped that it's very derivative, but something like Andor is theoretically derivative in that it's that original trilogy era. I mean, it's literally a spin-off from Rogue One, so it is by definition derivative. But it's so phenomenal because it's focusing on interesting characters and exploring interesting ideas, and really exploring the moral ambiguity of rebellion and revolution in a very mature way, not just a Saturday morning kind of way. Something that I think can be thoroughly enjoyable even for adults. But again, Andor is the exception that proves the rule. Like, very simple. Just make it good. Just hire good writers and good directors and good actors. But that is not always a given in Hollywood. So, if that's not on the table and my crazy idea is not on the table, then I think they really just need to focus on different time periods of the Star Wars universe, different nooks and crannies of the universe, different kinds of stories, in order for the franchise to sustain itself. But then you also have to ask the question, is it okay if a franchise ends? Like, does it need to go on forever? Because we haven't really had this, because franchises as we've come to understand them didn't really develop till the 20th century. So we don't know. Like, we're about to enter, in a couple of years, we're going to have Star Wars' 40th anniversary. Some of these comic book characters are coming up on a century. When do these end? Are they gonna keep going on with the same continuities and, the same... I don't know. For hundreds of years, I don't think that's sustainable. And I think more likely they'll just die a really slow death. But maybe instead you could just kind of go out on a high note. But of course, Disney didn't buy Lucasfilm and Star Wars for $4.5 billion or whatever it was for them to gracefully end on a high note. They are going to milk this cow until it is it is so gaunt. Every ounce of fluid has been extracted from this body before they decide, okay, we'll give it a break. Wow, what an interesting story. I'm sure you have some thoughts about the topic, so comment below, let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps people find the channel and makes me feel all warm inside. Until next time, I'm Peter Mancuso. Peace out.